Assalamu alaikum.
Salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, fine. Happy
That's
New
good.
Year, and inshallah, everything went well.
Great, great. Happy New Year.
Thank
Anyway,
you.
we are
Thank
following Gregorian calendar, so it's like the New Year.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Any issues with COVID in your area?
Actually, they said that it is the statistics shows the lowest numbers, but you never know. So you never know. Thanks to God, everything is not that bad. Not that bad.
Alhamdulillah. And you were able to do some traveling?
Yeah, like it's like non-stop and a lot of things to do, reports and still writing, and it's very nice time, enjoying in a way. just
Alhamdulillah.
just a second, sorry about that.
Welcome, Brother Akif.
Assalamu alaikum, doctor.
Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. How was the New Year in your area?
It's good. A lot of people drunk, a lot of fair work and such stuff. So,
Yeah. Unfortunately, some people use this opportunity to consume more alcohol and drugs.
Yeah, I think unfortunately it's everywhere, and it doesn't matter new year, not new year, holiday, not holiday. It's just they need
a
a
reason to
course.
drink.
Yeah, just an excuse.
Yeah, it's very sad because rather than being an opportunity for growth and strengthening our spirit, they turn it into a very destructive activity. This is very sad, unfortunately. Brother Akif, will you be doing any travels?
Inshallah. I don't know yet, but inshallah I'm planning maybe participate out of conference in Turkey. And I have some other plans. If it will work, then maybe I will travel also, but I don't know yet exactly.
Inshallah, hopefully the COVID situation will not create any difficult for you.
They say that very soon it's gonna be over, inshallah. Everyone is keep saying that. The restrictions might be remained, but still, in a way, it will be not as bad as it was before. So it's getting better, hopefully, inshallah.
Inshallah, we are looking forward to that. And Sister Yelena, I think, was planning a conference next month or later on in Kazakhstan, I believe. So we hope it will go through successfully. Ameen. I wanted to thank both of you for your participation and your engagement in my classes. It's been a real honor to be your professor and to share what little knowledge I have with both of you.
To be
Yeah, and
honest, yeah,
thank you.
Akif, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Midafan. Yeah, and thank you, doctor, for your interesting classes and interesting topics what we discussed here.
And the honor was ours. It is really interesting, and all the time we get to know discuss different interesting topics. And you are quite modest by saying that you know just little. For sure, you know more than we do. So don't be that too modest. It was really enjoyable, interesting, different type of class. Thank you for that.
You're welcome, and hopefully we are trying to make sure that IKI Academy will continue to develop and to succeed uh, based upon great students such as all of you, and hopefully more and more good and wonderful professors that we can recruit into the IKI Academy. And I hope all of you, inshallah, can continue to play a positive role. As far as this class is concerned, I may have mentioned that we hope everything has been turned in by today. If there's any issues, we can give some extensions up to 1 week. So let me know privately by WhatsApp. And I really appreciate all the work you have been doing for this class and the participation. Yes, Sister Gabriela.
I just want to ask, how would you like us to turn in our research papers? Should we email you? And what format should it be? Should it be PDF or Word document?
Email, please, using Word, like the assignments.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you for that question. Since this is the very last class on the very last day of the semester, I wanted to be here for you to ask any questions that may have not been asked, like the great question that Gabriela just asked about handing in the final paper. I hope your experience with writing the paper has been a positive one. Some of you have written papers before, others have not, and I tried to divide it into sections to make it easier for all of you. When I was in college, I used to do something called procrastination. I used to always delay handing something in until I learned to do it in small chunks. Gabriela, your hand is still up?
Sorry, I didn't press the button. No, I don't have any more questions. Sorry.
So in this class, what I wanted to cover was some of the last topics that I had in mind. And I wanted to cover the topic of maqasid al-sharia. Who of you have studied it or are taking a class in this area of the goals of sharia maqasid? Yes, Brother Akif, you have taken a course?
Yes, today actually our last class is Dr. Kapoor in this subject also. After your class, exactly.
Excellent. And Zarina also?
Yes, Doctor.
Very good. Most Muslims, unfortunately, do not know hardly anything about maqasid and maybe never heard of them. And even the Muslims who know about it, unfortunately, there can be a lot of confusion. And I just want to add a little bit about my limited knowledge of maqasid because I'm not the expert, but it's one of the areas that affects Islam and gender relations. And the way it does that, it affects Islam and gender issues because the people who are trying to create a negative environment for Muslim women, to repress and oppress Muslim women, who want to turn Muslim women into second-class citizens, like the terrorists and the fundamentalists and the extremists, many of whom unfortunately belong to the Salafi and Wahhabi movements, but even other so-called Muslim or Islamic movements. They interpret the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet in their own way. And one way to respond to these extremists, to inform them or to enlighten them or to change their negative ideas about women and gender issues, is to use the maqasid approach. Now, if you respond to an extremist by saying that they are ignorant or they are bad people or they have an inability to think, this is problematic because it's just attacking them personally. It doesn't help solve any disagreement or issue. And if you accuse them of being outdated and of being backward and of being unable to deal with the real world. Also, it's a problem because they will say, well, you become a slave to the West or Western civilization, or you become one of those modern Muslims who doesn't really understand Islam. So again, it's not very useful to approach them in this way. So we have discovered at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and in many other places, and with the writings of the great scholars like Al-Faruqis and like Dr. Alwani and Dr. Abu Sulaiman, may Allah rest their souls in peace, is to respond to them from within the Islamic tradition in a way that they cannot reject. So that's one of the reasons that the whole maqasid approach has been revived by many people, including the people at the International Institute of Islamic Thought, is to respond to the extremists. And yes, I agree with you that this is important and relevant. And when it comes to issues about gender, there's not much to see in that perspective. So even though you see the extremists, one of the first people or one of the most obvious people that they denigrate and they put down and they deny their rights is Muslim women. So what does the maqasid approach says? In my understanding, the maqasid approach says that you cannot make any rule in Islam in terms of mu'amalat. I'm not talking about ibadat. I'm not talking about the 5 fundamental rituals, the prayer and the fasting and the zakat and the hajj and the shahada. Those are ibadat. We're not dealing with that. We're dealing with everything else, which is the interactions between human beings. So with the mu'amalat, with the interactions, according to the maqasid approach, you cannot make anything haram or unacceptable unless it clearly violates one of 5 things. So the maqasid says the whole point of Sharia, or the main objective or the primary reason for Sharia, for the rule of law in Islam, is to protect life and to protect faith, our deen, and to protect our mind, our brain, our thinking, and to protect our property. And number 5 is to protect the future generations. They call progeny, our children and our children's children and so on. So everything in Islam, when it comes to mu'amalat, ultimately has to protect these 5 things. If something does not hurt any of these 5 things, you cannot make it haram. Okay? You cannot claim that it is made unacceptable by Allah or by the Prophet, peace be upon him. It has to hurt or destroy one or more of these 5 things. So as we had mentioned before, when the terrorists and the fundamentalists and the extremists, they do not allow women to vote, or they do not allow women to travel alone, or they do not allow women to sing or to dance, unless they can show that it will kill you or destroy your faith or destroy your brain or destroy your property or destroy your children and progeny, then they cannot say it's haram. They might say that it has some issues and might cause some issues. That's okay, fine, like anything else might cause issues. But they cannot claim it is haram unless they can show a direct link, harm in one of these 5 areas. And the beauty of the maqasid approach, the reason it has become so important, is no matter what the extremists and the fundamentalists try to do, they cannot deny that these are the maqasid of the Sharia. They cannot claim that these 5 things have nothing to do with Sharia. These maqasid, these goals of Sharia, have been solidified and have been made very clearly a part of what the Muslim scholars would call Islamic Sharia. So you cannot deny it. So what the fundamentalists or the terrorists or the extremists would have to do is they would have to make a claim that something indeed violates your faith. So they come up with assumptions. Okay, they say, well, if we allow Muslims to dance, then there's the problem of men and women dancing, and strange men, strange women, non-mahram, according to them, shouldn't be dancing. And the response to that is to say, well, that's true for anything else. I mean, men and women should not be in any type of unacceptable relationship, whether it's in the mall, whether it's in the theater, whether it's at work, whether it's on the bus, anywhere there should be proper relations between men and women. Dancing is no different. Okay, so the same rules apply anyway. Dancing is not some separate category where these rules somehow show up and then it doesn't show up at work or doesn't show up on the bus or doesn't show up in the mall. And until they can come up with a research study and multiple research studies that confirm that every time any Muslim dances, they immediately and only dance with a non-mahram, with a person who is not allowed for them to dance with, then they might have a valid claim. Other than that, their claim is invalid. There's nothing specific about singing or dancing which requires you to do it in a non-acceptable way with a member of the opposite sex. Okay, it's like saying dinner parties are haram. Why? Oh, because men and women intermingle unacceptably. Well, that's not a requirement of a dinner party. I've had dinner parties all my life. You know, we invite couples or friends. We never create an environment where there is unacceptable interaction between men and women. And if that happens, the blame is on the man and woman who are interacting unacceptably, not on the party or the workplace or the bus or the mall or amusement center or whatever you want to do in terms of public life for Islam. Furthermore, there's a very important element of maqasid that requires Muslims to be more understanding of their own faith. What a lot of Muslims don't realize is we have put in Islam, through the Quran and through the example of the Prophet Muhammad, a huge value on human life. Now, Muslims might say it and they say, yeah, if you kill one person, it's like you killed everybody because there's a verse in the Quran about it. They say it, but they don't really believe it. They're not convinced about it. They don't put it into practice. In fact, what some Muslims do, especially the terrorists, they say, oh, it's okay to kill innocent people because they're not really innocent. They're part of some entity that has caused harm or injustice. So I have some very good Palestinian friends. I love them. They're wonderful people. But then they tell me, oh, yeah, it's okay, you know, to go, some Muslim to blow themselves up in the Israeli market because, you know, everybody's a combatant in Israel. I say this is nonsense. This is completely against the Quran. You are not allowed to kill an innocent person under any circumstances. And before you can even kill somebody in Islam, there is Sharia. So when this fellow Khomeini in Iran issued a fatwa against this guy, Salman Rushdie, for writing a book that allegedly discredits or says terrible things about Prophet Muhammad and Sayyidah Aisha, Khomeini issued his own fatwa that any Muslim who sees Salman Rushdie should kill him. This, from the point of view of maqasid and from the point of view of the scholars we have been talking about, is rubbish. Is what Khomeini did is haram. Okay, nobody can issue a proclamation against anybody, Muslim or otherwise, that that person has to be killed. It has to go through the court process. If you are accusing somebody of a criminal offense, then you have to go to court. You submit the accusation. The police investigate it. If it is proper, then the person is a suspect. They are taken to court, and they go through, and they have a right to a court process, to a proper court hearing in the Islamic courts. And then if that course, the court finds this person guilty, then there is a determination of punishment. That's how it works in Islamic Sharia. There's no other way around that. Okay? The nonsense done by Al-Qaeda or Taliban or by Daesh or ISIS or Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, by Boko Haram in Nigeria, is, according to the scholars we have studied, anti-Islam, totally in violation of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now you can also do proactive measures. How do you preserve the life and the faith and the mind and the property and the children of people? One element that's very important is to give everybody their proper rights, particularly women and children. Okay? So we cannot talk about a successful Muslim society unless everybody, men and women, not just have rights, but those rights are respected. And the Maqasid approach promotes this idea. Give everybody their rights, make sure that no man, no woman is killed or hurt because they express some opinion, or because they ran away from a bad marriage, or because they do not want to put up with an abusive husband. Their right to life must be respected. Many Muslims might say, yes, yes, that's good, that's wonderful. But then in practice, many Muslims violate it. So the so-called honor killing, which is killing a Muslim woman on the rumor or on the allegation that she somehow met somebody who is not a mahram or engaged in an illicit relationship. Okay, honor killing is completely haram. In fact, it's very sad that it's called honor killing because it's a dishonorable, it is a crime. Any man or even woman who kills their daughter, their sister, their cousin, their nephew, their niece, who's a woman because of some allegation, is committing a crime that is punishable on this earth with death and with or some requirement for diya, for the payment for wrongly killing another person, and of course they will burn in hellfire according to the Quran and Sunnah. Murder is haram, pure and simple. You can try to justify it, and the people who are misogynists and who are sexist, they justify it that somehow a woman has committed a grave error. Yeah, men and women commit errors, but they're not punishable by death. And even if they are, you are not allowed to carry it out yourself. It has to go through the court system. Now, if the court system works, that's great. Unfortunately, in many Muslim countries, the court system doesn't work very well, such as this issue with zina, with adultery. Some countries like Pakistan say we have to punish adultery. So how would they do it? Well, it's very clear in Islamic law that before you can accuse any woman of adultery, you have to have 4 witnesses to the fact. They have to be there seeing it live in front of their faces. Unless these 4 men or 4 witnesses, 4 women, are willing to come forward and testify in court that they saw the woman and the man committing adultery in front of the eyes of the witness, then it becomes qadhf, it becomes false accusation, which is itself a punishable crime. Okay, qadhf, false accusation, is a crime from the time of the Prophet until today in Islamic Sharia. And by the way, even when so-called these crimes occur, these crimes of honor occur, how come the focus tends to be on the woman? There's always a man involved. Why don't they focus on the man? Okay, this really is puzzling. Well, as you know from gender class, we know it's not so puzzling because we realize that we are dealing with patriarchies, with societies that consider men more important than women, and men to be less obligated to observe the law and the Sharia then women and men are able to get away, in a sense, get away with murder. So even if a man is convicted of murder, let's say for honor killing, they don't go to life in prison. They're sentenced to much shorter period, or even they go out on parole, and that's all they have to do, or community service. It's completely unjust, illogical system that hurts women. It doesn't strengthen Islam at all, unfortunately. It creates a horrible impression of Islam, in my opinion, and leads to people saying that Islam is definitely therefore a sexist, misogynist religion because it mistreats women, although it claims, right, in Islam we assert that we have given women rights, and Islam gives women dignity and respect and preserves their life and property. But in practice, this is not done, especially in some of the legal systems in Muslim countries themselves. Are we going to be able to solve this problem? Hopefully through maqasid and more education in the Muslim world. This is what we hope to happen. When my father and Dr. Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman and myself wrote the book on parenting, this is what we're trying to do, to break this cycle so that the new generation grows up with correct ideas about men and women and gender issues. And if the children are educated properly, then when they grow up and they get married and they have kids, their kids will be educated properly. And you start to see the end of these really horrible issues with regard to Islam and gender, as well as many other issues. Which brings us to the issue of education. Okay. Does any Muslim country have an education system that uplifts women and emphasizes throughout every year of education the role that men and women play as people who have been given rights by their creator? Does any education system really emphasize how important it is to look out for those who are weaker, whether women or men, and to support the victim rather than the victimizer? I mean, what kind of tragedy is it that a man who rapes a woman, the solution they come up with is for them to get married? Absolute, horrific, barbaric, terrible types of, it's not a solution, really. It's just doing a favor to the rapist. And in fact, it's encouraging illegal rape, if this is the so-called solution, rather than the rapist being fully punished and made to amend for his horrible, terrible crime. So this will take educational change. But have we found any educational system so far that is properly addressing these issues from an Islamic perspective? Now, from a modern perspective, yes, many education systems have come to realize that what is being promoted in the West nowadays, at least on paper, with equal rights and with respect for men and women, and with the notion of the legal system supporting the victim and supporting the weak, then this is a good thing, the notion of human rights, okay? But if you're doing it just to imitate the West, that's problematic. If it's a good thing, you should do it, but not to make yourself look good in terms of the West or to look like the West. You should be doing it because it's the right thing. However, many of our education systems are imitative. They simply take the curriculum with little or no modification from Western countries, Europe, North America, and then they translate it or they put it in their own curriculum, and that's called education. Okay. The fact of the matter is the solution is education. But if you look at education today in the Muslim world, some places are better than others, but as a whole, it's a failure. It's really tragic. Now you might say, yeah, there are some systems that are good at teaching math, and they're good at teaching physics, and they're good at teaching some hard sciences, they call. Okay, fine. But life is not just the hard sciences. Social sciences are important. Religious sciences are important. Arts are important. What are we teaching our kids? What are our schools teaching our kids in these areas? It's either outdated or nonsense or wrong or anti-Islamic or fundamentalist or extremist, depending on where you are in the Muslim world, which is, in my opinion, a serious problem that classes like this one are trying to resolve and trying to achieve a better outcome in the future. Is this a trivial question? Some people might say so, but to me, this is actually closely linked with the survival of Islam and the Muslim community. Will Islam survive in the next 100 years? Will there be Muslims in the next 100 years? I don't know. I'm very concerned personally. I'm very worried. Now, there will be human beings whose parents were Muslim. Yes, that will probably continue until the Day of Judgment. But are they Islamic? Will we truly have believers that are successful and who are able to practice, not just say they're Muslim, but practice Islam in a comprehensive way through the principles of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad? I think that's a question that remains to be answered. How many Muslims are there today? 1.5 billion, 2 billion? Some people are so proud of that. My question is, whether it's 1 billion, 1.5 billion, 2 billion, what is the quality of these Muslims nowadays? Are we really proud of all these Muslims? Some of them, yes, we can be very proud of, like the people you have chosen to write about, the great Muslim women leaders, okay? Alhamdulillah, that's very positive and uplifting. But what about the rest? What about the men who continue to hurt people, including women? What about the men who are misogynistic and sexist and racist and despicable people who do horrible things to women and to the weak and to the poor? This is happening throughout the Muslim world. I mean, not only the Muslim world, also in the non-Muslim world. But as a Muslim, I'm concerned more about the Muslim world because I'm not responsible for the non-Muslim world. I am primarily responsible for myself and my immediate family and my neighborhood and my village and the ummah. That's who we are responsible for. So if we're going to focus upon our responsibilities, then we will be asked on the Day of Judgment, what is the situation of your people? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask every person, every Muslim is going to hold them accountable. What were the problems of your time and what was done to address them? What have we done to prevent honor killings? What have we done to make sure that women are not forced into a marriage that they do not agree to? What have we done to ensure that women can travel where they want to, when they want to, how they want to, without being forced to get permission from some male or some authority? These are real issues, and these are creating not just difficulties with development, they create underdevelopment and they create regress, right? When you put your women down, when women they are treated with injustice, then a huge segment of society suffers. And when such a big segment of society suffers, then the whole society suffers. And how is Allah going to give a blessing and barakah and support to a society that is not following the fundamental teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in all things, but especially when it comes to gender relations? And then you look at the universities. Any questions so far?
No, thank you.
If you look at the universities, there's actually a very interesting book that was published by the International Institute of Islamic Thought on Reforming Universities by Mr. Ziauddin Sardar. And I translated this book from English to Arabic. So it does a survey, it does a study of all universities around the world, and the conclusions are three conclusions that basically for almost all universities, whether they're very advanced or less advanced or big or small or Muslim or non-Muslim, they have three main problems. One is that there is a lot of limitation in the mind of the students. We call it stovepiping. Okay, it means, for example, if you are studying history, then you study a very particular period of history for answering a very particular question. So you know about a very sub segment of the field of history, but you don't have a comprehensive view of the natural and the social sciences and the arts. You're focused so much on your subfield of study. Okay, if you're focused so much on your subfield of study and you don't have a broad understanding of the other subjects, like for example, many people in many departments, when they are doing their studies, let's say they are in the psychology department, they don't talk to people from the history department, from the political science department, from the biology department, from the visual arts department. In fact, if you are studying psychology in most or a lot of universities, you hardly talk to everybody within the department itself, except for those who are in your subfield or the professors who are teaching you. So this is a problem, because that means that you have so much knowledge about a tiny area, but you are not understanding the big picture and the importance of looking at issues from many perspectives. And so this is a problem. The other problem with universities is there is no spiritual part. Universities ignore our spirit, our nature in terms of our soul, our spiritual needs. Either the university ignores it or even denies it or calls it nonsense. And even the so-called, maybe they're Islamic or Christian universities or Jewish universities that address this, it's still done more or less superficially. Okay? And if you ignore the spirit, as you know, spirit is just as important as any other part of our life, sometimes more important. If you ignore that, then we have a real ignorance about ourselves and about how we were created by our Creator and how to connect to our Creator. So what good is it to graduate as a great engineer or great doctor if you have no soul? Which means, what's stopping you from lying and cheating and stealing and being a terrible person who then becomes a millionaire? And this is a discussion we have with many parents. Uncle, auntie, what do you want your child to be? Oh, I want them to be very famous lawyer, or I want them to be, very world famous heart surgeon. Okay, for what? What's the point? Oh, so they can have a good job and then have a good family, nice house, nice car. And then that's pretty much the level of discussion in a lot of Muslim families. And we say to them, this is very materialistic. Yeah, it's good to be a doctor, it's good to be a lawyer, but if there's no point, if you don't teach them what the point is, except that it's about getting more money, then you've created materialistic people. And if you don't, if they're not provided with a good understanding of the soul, the importance of respecting and growing their soul, then there's nothing stopping them from becoming thieves and liars and terrible people. There's no, they don't learn values or implement values, and they don't learn proper character. They won't get into heaven, and they will make this world a worse place rather than a better place. So all this time and money and effort spent on the kids getting a very high level education in the best schools, best universities, hundreds of thousands of dollars being spent, and they become soulless, money grubbing, materialistic people. Is this really a good outcome for the ummah? How is this supposed to help anybody? This is truly a problem, and the universities don't address this, okay, or don't address it very well. So we talked about the stovepiping problem. Number two, the lack of spirituality in almost all universities around the world. And number three is the issue that universities do not have as their main goal and mission to create what can be called change agents. That means women and men who have the mission, have the vision to make the world a better place. You see, this world has huge problems, right? Whether it's environmental destruction, pollution, wars, poverty, refugees. I mean, there's major problems in this earth. The kind of problems where we cannot live on this earth in 50 years or 100 years. It's not sustainable, right? Our children or children's children will die out. I mean, this is pretty serious. Regardless of the estimate you make, whether it's 50 years or 500 years, if the end result is we've destroyed the earth and the environment, then this is a very serious crime. This is a very serious destruction of the gift that Allah has given us. So if our universities are not producing change agents who will make the world a better place, if they're not producing spiritual people, if they're not producing people who understand different fields and how they relate to each other, then this is a serious handicap and has to be resolved and must be resolved. And there have been attempts like at International Islamic University in Malaysia and some other institutions to try to address this, but it needs a lot more work and a lot more effort. And this directly impacts gender relations, okay? Everybody who goes to a university needs to know something about gender relations, okay? Whether you take it as a course or learn it through the curriculum or part of the extra curriculum, somehow, somewhere, some way, you have to understand how to relate properly between women and men so that marriages can be successful, so that parenting can be successful, so that the job market can be successful, so that everything can be successful. Unless we resolve our gender issues, then there will be some serious issues in the family, in the religious community, in the world of work, in government, really serious issues that are not good for anybody. And you can add to that the issue of how we can address the gender issues in a way so that everybody is working toward the same goals, meaning making the world a better place, solving the serious issues with humanity, with the earth, with the environment, and with stopping wars and stopping conflict and stopping the refugee crisis. As you know, the largest refugee crisis in the world today is involving Muslims, right? Millions of Muslims have been running away from Syria, from the problems in Lebanon, from Yemen, from Libya, from various parts of Africa, from Myanmar, the Rohingya Muslims there, and now the poor brothers and sisters, the Uyghur Muslims in China. Millions are being tortured and raped and enslaved and put into labor camps and concentration camps. How can we sit back and do nothing about this? This is a real tragedy. Our governments know about this, but the vast majority of our governments don't care. Or even worse than not caring, they're supporting the Chinese government. I mean, if you can imagine that. Chinese government is killing Muslims, and Muslim governments are on the side of the Chinese government. It's such a state of affairs that is completely hard to make sense out of it. I mean, it's happened before in human history, and that's why we really need to understand Islamic history and human history to realize that many of the mistakes that we're doing today actually have been committed in the past. And Akif, yeah, you're pointing out it's about money and politics. But why is that? Why is this? Why is the strongest motivating factor for us money and power, or rather than harmony and peace? Where is this coming from? Why are we teaching our children that money and power are more important than anything else? And who taught the parents this? And why is it being promoted in the schools? And why are we sending children to schools that teach that money and power is more important than anything else? This is really a crazy state of affairs. And like I was saying with education, education throughout the world, whether in the advanced world or the less advanced world, has been proven over and over again to be a failure. The education of our children is a failure. Okay? They might be able to do good multiplication and to do a good physics experiment, but our education system is not creating honest people, trustworthy people, good-hearted people, kind people, in addition to being people who can innovate and people who can use their intelligence wisely, and people who can make this world a better place. This is not what our education systems are producing. Our education systems are, producing ignorant people to a large extent. I know there's a lot of exceptions, of course, and I'm not talking about any of you or your kids, but I'm saying for many of the families that I've met throughout my life, it's just a tragedy what the schools are teaching them. The schools even I went to in my life. Most of it is a waste of my time and the waste of the students' time. From the very beginning, from nursery, preschool, kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, secondary school, college, university, graduate school, most of it, vast majority, is just a waste of time. And I wish it wasn't just a waste of time. It's hurtful rather than neutral or positive. Okay, so like these issues with gender, where are men learning to abuse women? Where is this coming from? Yes, it could be coming from their families, but it's not just the families, it's also the education systems. Education systems should be not only, education systems should not promote sexism and misogyny, number one. And number two, they should promote healthy relations between the genders. But the vast majority of our education systems, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, are not doing that. In fact, they're reinforcing the social ills that our previous generations and before them have been practicing. So it's a really serious problem with our schools and with our religious institutions. If you go to the imams all around the world, great people, wonderful people, nice people, good people, but many of them are terrible when it comes to what they think about gender relations. This is more obvious in organizations like the Taliban, of course, and the Wahhabis and the Salafis, but it happens throughout the Muslim world. And it's not just uneducated. In fact, educated and very educated people have some horrible ideas about Islam and gender issues, right? And they use the Quran to justify hurting women and oppressing women and doing injustice to women and not giving them their rights and forcing them into marriages that they don't want, and having a double standard where the boy can go out and stay out and have fun with friends. Of course, family and schools and TV. Yeah, so the family has an influence, the education system has an influence, and the media. Media, very powerful influence, especially the social media, as Umida Khani were saying. So this is another thing. So you have education, but there's education that's coming from the schools and the teachers and the imams, and there's education that's coming from the media, which not many people pay attention to. But our children are learning a lot of what they are getting into their head, some from the school and some from their friends, some from their parents, maybe from the masjid, but a lot of it is from media, from social media, from programs on the television or through the internet. And if you take a look at the content of that, of course, some of it is good, but a lot of it is absolutely horrid. It's destroying our kids systematically, giving them very bad ideas and negative ideas. So you look at the movies, whether it's produced in Hollywood in the U.S. or in India from Bollywood, or from Nigeria from Nollywood, or all these other places. What are we and our children seeing in the movies and on TV shows? Rarely is there good image and projection of positive gender relations. A lot of it is very sexist, very demeaning toward women and men also, and teaching the wrong ideas and the wrong principles, and it's leading to so many disease, right? Where some women think that they're not beautiful enough, so they have to put on so much makeup, or some women think that they're too fat, so they engage in this forced throwing up, forced vomiting. Anorexia nervosa is one of the psychological conditions. Okay, if a young girl or young boy thinks, even though they're not fat, but they think they're fat, which they think makes them ugly, which they think is terrible for them, so they have to forcefully make their body reject their food. Okay, so many psychological issues with young women and young men, and so what we are producing is we are producing monsters, people who hurt other people, or we are producing weak people, whether men or women. They are weak, easily influenced, easily controlled, easily manipulated, easily getting themselves into situations that are harmful or unacceptable. Okay, if a person is at work and their boss tells them to do a crime or to do something bad to themselves, will they say yes or no? Okay, so if a man wants a promotion and his boss says, well, you have to write a false report, will they do it? Okay, if a boss says to another employee, well, if you want me to give you a raise or higher salary, you have to have sex with me. So this sexual harassment on the job is everywhere. Okay, in the Muslim world and the non-Muslim world, and it's not going away. It's getting worse, unfortunately. Now they have laws, more laws now against it, but by itself, a law does nothing. The law, I mean, Allah controls everything, of course, but the law, the human-made law, based upon what Allah wants or other systems, is not meaningful unless it is believed in and implemented willingly. But if it is forced, people will reject it. And so how can we produce men and women in society who are willing to stand up, to stick with their principles, even if it means losing your job, losing your income, losing some money? We are having a hard time producing that kind of person. Okay, we're having a hard time producing students who will be honest with their professors. Okay, and who say to their professors, if they think the professor said something right, we believe that this is something correct and right. And if they think their professor is saying something wrong, we need students to state, look, professor, you know, we respect that you have a certain opinion, but there's another opinion which may be more correct than your opinion. Okay, this is something that is essential for education, to challenge the professor, not for the sake of challenging by itself, but to create an environment of intellectual discourse, intellectual discussion, a coming together of ideas and a clash of ideas and a discussion of ideas and going back and forth to try to create better understanding, not to create conflict or chaos, but to create better understanding. This is not easy, and not every student has been trained to do it. And we need more professors who are honest. Many professors are honest, but many professors are dishonest, or they obfuscate the truth, or they confuse the students, or they mix truth with falsehood, or what is their opinion they claim is a fact, or what is a fact they say, no, it's not really a fact, it depends on how you look at it. I know when I was teaching some undergraduates many years ago, I would ask them a question, for example, how should we deal with this issue of homelessness? And they say, oh, well, depends on each person how they want to deal with it. And to me, that is a ridiculous answer. What do you mean it depends on each person? I'm asking you, how do you think we can address this issue of homelessness? Don't tell me it depends. Yeah, it depends on what you think is the correct answer. So give me the correct answer. They are not intellectually honest enough or brave enough sometimes to tell me what they really think. They just want to make it into a relativistic situation, they say. In other words, they answer every question that says, well, it depends on the person, it depends on the situation, it depends on the time, it depends on what's going on. They're running away from stating a principle. Okay, homelessness is different from one time to another, one place to another. We already know that. A lot of people don't have a house, so they sleep on the street. But to understand it and to solve it, we need people to be honest and to have an idea, to come up with an idea, to share their ideas, and then to work together. But if you're not even willing to have an opinion about it, then this is very serious. This is basically, well, I wouldn't call it intellectual dishonesty, although that exists, but it's intellectual cowardice. Being a coward when it comes to sharing your opinion or stating your opinion. And this is one of the reasons why the problems with gender issues continues, is because when an observer sees problems with gender issues, they don't say anything. And sometimes even it's a problem that they are facing, they don't say anything. Either they're afraid, or they don't want to have problems, or it's too complicated, or they are not comfortable in front of other people sharing what they truly feel, or they think that their friends will no longer be their friends. I mean, there's all kinds of excuses for people seeing a problem and not doing anything about it. But this is a real problem. And this is what our education systems are producing. People who do nothing. The only thing they do is they listen to the government, which is exactly what the governments want. Okay, government education produces robots, I mean, human beings, of course, but produces the output is individuals who will blindly follow the government and not question the government. They don't want people who think, who ask questions, who are innovative. I mean, of course, there are exceptions, but governments don't like people who challenge the government. Just like many parents, unfortunately, and I don't like making this analogy, they don't like children who challenge them. They don't like children who ask too many questions. They don't like children who take their time. They want to just put the child, for example, in front of the TV and let them waste their time in front of the TV so that they don't take the time of the parent, which is one of the worst types of parenting, right? And as I mentioned, television, many of the shows on television teach very wrong ideas about gender issues and gender relations. And that's why we are seeing more and more issues in marriages, because men get incorrect ideas about proper marital relations from TV, and women as well. Not just TV, but men and women get wrong ideas about gender issues from TV and social media and magazines and newspapers. So many sources. but the result is incorrect understandings or bad or harmful types of ideas from this toxic environment that leads to failed marriages, bad relationships, ineffective parenting, and a host of other problems. I would like to thank you for being part of this class and listening to the lectures, and I'm very proud of you for the great work you have been doing with your assignments and with your paper. And I look forward to all of you getting the highest grades in all your classes and continuing your pursuit of knowledge. Yes, Sister Zarina. Zarina? Did you have a question, sister?
Yeah. Assalamualaikum, doctor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes,
Doctor.
hello.
Sorry, because my internet is not good here. So I just had some burning question for you. This is, I think this is more related to anthropology and culture, but because, okay. So I want to ask about some sort of what we call the Western call is discrimination against women, which is about female genital mutilation, FGM. So I think that it's come out to the complexity of the maqasid, where I see it's like a gray area. When in Islam, there's a different school of fiqh law. For example, Hanafi, female circumcision is permissible. And if in Malaysia, in Shafi'i school of law, circumcision is obligation for both men and women. So it has become a deep culture in Malaysia and a sign of modesty in Malaysia. And also, I believe that in most of the Southeast Asia country. So so there's research in Malaysia that there is no health issue because this is not FGM, but we mostly we perform the female circumcisions, and there is no it also preserve the religion, love, mental, property, and progeny. So I want to gain your opinion, doctor, about this gray area in the maqasid, and also I want to ask about LGBT. So usually in maqasid, from your lecturer, there is preserve of the, I mean that Muslim worlds that difficult to change to better future. But what if about some cultural reform, for example, to normalize LGBT? What kind of maqasid methods that we can use? Because from what I see, that LGBT will affect my women's rights. For example, by sharing bedrooms and all. So I hope to gain your wisdom from this question. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Zarina. And I hope everybody has understood the questions that Zarina put forth. Who would like to share their thoughts on these topics? So from the issue, or regarding the issue of female circumcision or female genital mutilation, I think Gabriela said it very well. It is completely haram. It is not a gray area. It is a violation of Islam. It did not originate from Islam. Anybody who practices FGM, female genital mutilation, is committing a huge sin. Okay. Now, there are some imams who support it, and they are a group of imams who are, part of this whole problem that we're dealing with Islam and gender issues. These imams, in the opinion of many scholars, especially the scholars of the International Institute of Islamic Thought, any imam who supports female genital mutilation is ignorant and wrong and completely misinterpreting and misunderstanding the Islamic sources. Prophet, peace be upon him, never allowed it. The Quran never allowed it. Circumcision has always been about boys and not girls. And this issue of limiting sexuality, why would an imam want to limit sexuality? Quran didn't limit sexuality. Prophet didn't limit sexuality between men and between husband and wife. So why would these imams be worried about sexuality and want to limit sexuality? It's a completely barbaric act. It's horrific. It violates many principles in Islam, including the principle of health and well-being and not destroying your own body. And so on so many levels, it is 100% criminal haram practice, and yet people continue to do it. A lot of people in Egypt and Sudan and Somalia, among other countries in Africa and Asia, they continue to do it to their own children. And again, they are being supported by some very misguided imams. But to me, there's a bigger question. How come more Muslims are not, and also in the North Caucasus, yes, it is going on. How come more and more Muslims are not coming out against it publicly, announcing it, writing about it, condemning it? Okay, so I can condemn it here in front of you in the classroom, but where are the rest of the Muslims who are saying publicly to their families, to their neighbors, to their friends, to their teachers, to their imams, to their villages, even if it's a tradition? Just because something is a tradition, that's correct, Brother Akif. Why do you have to, even if something is a tradition, if it's wrong, right? Why are people unwilling to come out and say it's wrong? It's a tradition, but it's a wrong tradition. I mean, the Prophet spent, peace be upon him, spent 13 years in Mecca arguing with these non-Muslims from Quraysh, with these pagan people, the idol worshippers. They kept telling him, well, we do it because of tradition. And the Prophet is like, that's not an excuse. Doing something wrong because of a tradition, because it's a tradition, does not justify it. If it's a good thing, you should do it because it's a good thing, not because it's a tradition. If it's a bad thing, you have to stop it, even if it is a tradition. And the problem is ignorance. Yes, Umida Khan. But you see, there's a difference between a person who's ignorant but who wants to learn and who's willing to get educated, and between a person who's ignorant but they don't want to be educated, right? So a person who doesn't know something, wants to get educated, they go take a course, they learn something at ITKI Academy. But those who are ignorant, but they don't want to learn, they don't want to be taught, they don't want to find out the truth, this is a very serious problem. And this is true for gender issues, including every other issue in the world. People just want to stay ignorant about these issues. Okay, they want to keep doing whatever they've been doing, or their parents or their grandparents or their families or their village or their culture has been doing, and they don't want to question it, and they don't want it to be questioned, which is a serious problem. And it was faced by the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he spent huge amount of time and effort trying to get rid of this problematic and very regressive mindset, right? That the world is the way it is, we don't change it, leave it like it is, and then what happens, happens, okay? Part of it is because of what is called fatalism, right? This idea that if a bad thing is going to happen, you can't stop it. If a good thing is going to happen, you can't stop it. So what's the point of doing anything? So this kind of fatalistic idea, which sometimes is spread by some Sufi groups or by some sheikhs or by some misguided scholars, totally against Islam, of course, because Islam doesn't say, if it's good or bad, it's going to happen anyway, and therefore don't do anything. Islam says when you see something good, you have to support it, not stay quiet. And when you see something bad, you have to go against it and not stay quiet. And you will be asked on the day of judgment, you will be held responsible. So Muslims are doing it sometimes, seeing bad things and trying to stop it, seeing good things and supporting it. But some Muslims are not. And like you have all pointed out, it's because of ignorance and fear and miseducation and other factors. Now, some people are do wrong things, but they think they're doing the right thing. Yeah, they have a closed mindset, like Umida Khan is saying. They don't accept what is not completely in line with what they think. But isn't that what we call arrogance, right? Isn't it arrogant to say that what I think is right and what everybody else thinks who is disagreeing with me is wrong? That's the height of arrogance, which is why the Quran put huge emphasis on humility. If you have this kind of thinking that says, as long as I do it and as long as I think it's this way, that has to be the right way and every other way is the wrong way, this is complete arrogance. And it destroys the arrogant person and everybody around them and the society. And that's something also that the Prophet, peace be upon him, fought against. He fought against the people who do wrong things based on tradition, and he fought against the people who are just arrogant, pure arrogance. And yes, Zarina, there is some Hanafi scholars that say female circumcision is permissible, but not a sunnah. But that Hanafis are human beings, okay? Just because a Hanafi scholar says something is right doesn't make it right, okay? Or just because they say it's wrong doesn't make it wrong, okay? So with all due respect to those Hanafi scholars and other scholars, if they say that circumcision is permissible, they are liars, okay? They are, even if it is in their school of law, they're liars, okay? Because it violates the Quran. You cannot rely on the tradition of a Hanafi scholar that violates the Quran and violates the Sunnah. You're not allowed to do that. If you do that, you're not a Muslim. You might as well choose some other religion, okay? And we have hadith that's very clear that if it harms your health, you cannot do it, as Akif has pointed out, okay? Maliki is considered as a preferred act in some cases. Shafi'is may say it's an obligation for men and women. Whoever says female circumcision is allowed or must be done is just wrong, okay? And they are violating very clearly the Quran and Sunnah. It's just like the people, well, not just like the people. Oh, yes, Brother Akif, go ahead.
Yes, doctor. I just wanted to point out one thing, that what I noticed, for example, in Shia Madhabs, there is no problem like this because no one is practicing it. And it's practiced only in few areas, like as you mentioned, for example, and as Sister Saida mentioned, that it's in Dagestan, North Caucasus, Russia, then some African regions, some African areas, and it's more about traditional stuff. It's like tradition. We all know that in Islam, for example, we will not find any hadith or any mention in Quran about this for women. As we know, this madhab, for example, what Sister Zarina mentioned, for example, that Maliki madhab says that it's a preferable act, for example, doing it. And Maliki madhab is most like widespread in Africa, actually. So I guess local scholars were trying to, to localize their traditions, use them, interpret them in the terms of Sharia. That's why they made such statements that, for example, it's allowed, it's not allowed. For example, in the areas where Shia Islam is spread, there was no such tradition. So there is no any opinion that, for example, it's allowed or something like this. And for example, Sister Zarina didn't mention opinion of Hanafi. or not Hanafi, sorry, Hanbali Mazhab, yes? Hanbali Mazhab is spread in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, they did not have such tradition as I know. So there is no opinions about this. So I guess in the areas where Mazhab was spread, they were trying to, how to say, put inside Sharia their local traditions.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Akif, for pointing out that historically, people take their local tradition that violates Islam and make it part of Islam or part of the Islamic tradition. So this is part of the problem. And as Sister Jenny has pointed out, clearly the Quran says you cannot disfigure or cause serious harm to yourself and to God's creation. It's just not allowed. No matter what the justification is. And then when you look at it from the maqasid perspective, your body is your property and your responsibility as well as your life. Anything that threatens that is haram. You cannot do it. Now, if you come to the lesbian, gay, bisexual issue, again, there is it's a growing issue. There are more and more people in this world, Muslim and non-Muslim, who are choosing to identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and other trans categories. The way of looking at it, so let me tell you one way, an alternative way. One way of looking at it is, oh, this is terrible. It's going to destroy Islam. Muslims are going astray. They are being given this nonsense by the West, and they are getting brainwashed, and they are doing this because they are misguided, or they are fools, or they are mentally incapacitated, or they have read the wrong books. Okay, it's a lot of extremists and terrorists and Wahhabis and Salafis use this kind of rhetoric. They make it into this massive issue and problem, and it's going to destroy the whole ummah, and Islam is going to go down the drain as a result. An alternative perspective is, look, from the beginning of human history until the end of human history, there is the mainstream, the moderates, the people who are doing what's best for themselves and for their community. And there are people who choose to do other things. Okay. Now, these other things can create conflict, and they can create confusion. But if you're going to claim that the lesbian, gay, bisexual issue is the most important issue in the Muslim world and the non-Muslim world, and it's going to lead to death and destruction and horrible things, there's no proof for that. That's a real exaggeration. Okay, it's problematic. It has its issues, like many other issues. But more and more studies are showing that people who end up choosing an alternative life course like these, the gays and lesbians, many, if not all of them, have been sexually abused as children. So the real problem is, in a sense, a criminal problem and a medical problem and a psychological problem, where young children are raped, they are sexually violated, and in some cases this leads to going toward an alternative lifestyle. So the solution, you see, you could yell every day, this is haram, this is terrible, this is very bad, really doesn't address the heart of the issue and the matter of where does it start to begin with. Now, it's already started, it exists, it's throughout society. What do you do about it? First of all, everybody should be honest. You support it, you should be, honest. You say, well, I support it. If you don't support it, you should be honest. You say, I don't support it. I will never teach my children or other children, if I ever have children, that this is a good thing. I will not consider it good for them. But it is not my responsibility or my authority to hurt anybody who chooses an alternative lifestyle. We cannot and we should not, as a society, cause any harm. It's not something where you put people in jail or you kill them or you deny them their rights. In the United States, it used to be the case where homosexuality was a crime, and in England and in many countries in Europe. Then they changed the rules, okay? Because these are decisions, they might not be wise decisions or they might not be the best decisions, but they're not criminal decisions. It's a private matter. We don't like it and we will condemn it as a community, but we do not, we will never harm, we are not allowed to harm the individuals. And the person remains a human being, so we have to respect their humanity and their dignity and their rights. So we can condemn the practice, but we should never condemn the human being, right? So scholars might say, you know, homosexuality and lesbianism is a problem for society. But we should never say homosexuals and lesbians are bad people. No, two separate things. And it's true across the board, okay? So if a group of people commits theft, okay, theft is haram. But the thieves are human beings, and they still have their rights and their dignity as a human being. Okay, so we always have to separate the act from the actor, whether it's a good act or a bad act. And what about the maqasid approach? The maqasid approach says these are behaviors that are immoral and unacceptable in Islam, but since they are not leading to death or loss of faith or problems with making progeny going into a destructive mode or denying property or denying mind, you cannot criminalize it. Okay, you can advocate against it, but it cannot be considered a criminal offense. If two men or two women want to get married, they don't want to have kids, it's not the government's job to come in and tell you what's right and what's wrong. That's the community. Community should decide, and if the community decides they don't want men marrying men or women marrying women in their community, okay. It's like communities who decide they will not they will not encourage or advocate or accept the marriage of a man to more than one woman and a woman to more than one man. Okay, that's every community has the prerogative to make that determination. Or if they want to allow multiple marriages, it might be a violation, yes, of Islamic principles, but it's not something you can criminalize. It's up to the community to try to understand what works best. But you see, all these problems after all the research and all the discussion, if you really want to solve it, don't solve it at the end stage, solve it at the beginning stage, which, as I was saying, we're talking education, okay? Where are they getting this idea from? How are they getting these ideas? And what can we do to provide the most proper ideas for the children, okay? We should never prevent them from understanding what homosexuality and lesbianism is. In fact, you should explain it to them and then add, this is unacceptable. We do not think this is the right behavior. So it's very clear in the eyes of the children, so they're not ignorant, okay? And children should be brought up along certain principles. But the deeper question is the problem of sexual abuse. If a child is sexually abused, this leads to some serious issues. Now, what if lesbian gay education is incorporated in childhood education? Who's incorporating it? Is it the government? That's very serious. What right? Why is the government educating our children in the first place? I mean, if it's in the mosque education curriculum, then we can hold the mosque accountable. But if it's the government schools, who is in charge of the government schools? And why are we sending our children to government schools? And why is the government involved in education in the first place? Government doesn't provide us with food in terms of being in charge of grocery stores. So why is government involved in teaching our children what's right and wrong? It's a serious issue that really needs to be discussed in the Muslim Ummah. Who should be providing education to our children, and how is that justified, and how is it paid for, and how is it run? That's why in the United States, many Muslims have taken their children out of the government schools, and they do it through alternative education or home education, because then you have the authority and the decision-making power over what your kids are taught. So many Muslims have decided they will never let their children be taught that lesbian and gay behavior is acceptable and just as respected as any other type of human relationship. And if they don't send their children to those schools, they will send their children to alternative schools. But why have parents become so upset and a big uproar when it came to lesbian and gay studies? There's a lot of nonsense being taught by the schools many years before these lesbian and gay studies came up in the curriculum. How come parents were quiet then? A lot of what the government teaches our children, some of it is good, a lot of it is terrible. Why haven't parents been complaining and raising a big issue for the last 50, 100 years when governments started to teach our kids? As you know, modern government education is a modern thing. It didn't exist 200 years ago. There was no such thing as government education. It was always done by the community, by the masjid, by the villagers, mostly through religious institutions. This idea of government education is a modern idea. It's a Western idea. It's a very problematic idea. And as I had already mentioned, the vast majority of government schools around the world are a failure. And lesbian and gay education is just the latest in a long list of things that are dysfunctional in the school systems throughout the world. Thank you for your ideas and comments and thoughts. I have really enjoyed teaching this class. You are wonderful students. I wish you the best. I hope all of you will be able to benefit more and more from IKI Academy, and I can understand how different people may have different ideas, but for me, the important thing is that we feel free to share our ideas and to try to understand each other. We don't have to disagree. We don't have to agree with each other. We can disagree, but we respect each other, and we try to make as much sense out of all the ideas and thoughts presented throughout. So it's been an honor to be your professor. I wish you the best. May Allah bless you all. Have a great year 2022. And anything I can do to help, let me know. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the Sunday and have a very productive and effective year ahead. Hope to see you next time. Inshallah. Thank you very much for all your classes.
You're welcome. Thank you.